Welcome, everyone. I'm Everton de Oliveira, Professor Agua, a founding member of the Groundwater Project. And we currently have about 900 volunteers working for us, or better, working with us. We all share the same noble intentions of making groundwater visible to all people in the world. We know how important it is, and we want to make sure that everybody knows so we can make a better planet. So we're producing books. I'd like to remind you that our books are free. They're also available for translations to anyone who's interested in volunteering for it. We have already 350 volunteers working from more than 50 countries and more than 30 languages. Today, I counted, we have 40 languages going on in our project. Very nice. Bring your country, bring your language to our initiative, and let's bring groundwater to everybody, to your home country in your own language. Please visit our website. So on behalf of the Groundwater Project, I'd like to thank all of you for making groundwater visible, right? So follow us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Share our posts and like them, please. This is so important. Like this video and subscribe to our channel. Okay, this is so important. Your participation will help give the importance that groundwater deserves. Today's session will discuss groundwater and transboundary aquifer. And we have here two very nice experts that will talk to us. First is Maria Luísa Telarolli de Almeida Leite. She's graduated in international relations. She's a master's in international relations and a doctor in geography. She's an assistant professor of international relations at the University of Sorocaba. She works with governance, environment, Guarani aquifer, Mercosul, and groundwater and transboundary waters. The second specialist is Pilar Carolina Villar. She graduated in law, master and PhD in environmental science. She's a professor at the Federal University of São Paulo. She's the author of the book Transboundary Aquifers and the Guarani Aquifer. Before we jump into their presentations, I would like to thank our sponsors. Without them, this noble endeavor will not be possible. Please consider sponsoring our project, making a donation. Every help counts because the world needs water, groundwater. Our sponsors are G360 in Canada, Hydroplan in Brazil, TDS Saudi Arabia, Aardvark, ACOM, Equanti, Blue Metric, the C3 Group, Well and Water Services, GeoEnviro Pro, Golder, GSI Environmental, KGS, MTE, Solins, Princeton Groundwater, SS Papadopoulos, Waterloo Barrier, Aqua Inside, Can Pipe, Conrad Well Drilling, Synergel, and our supporters are Hydrogeologists Without Borders, Instituto Água Sustentável, Water Research Commission, Groundwater Division, GSSA, and we're partnering with GRIP. Thank you very much for your sponsors and your support to our project. Então, obrigado a todos. Eu gostaria, então, de passar direto à nossa discussão. Por favor, nossa primeira convidada, Maria Luísa, por favor, a apresentação é sua. Obrigado.
Obrigada. So I will start my presentation thanking the Groundwater Project for this invitation, and it is an honor to be here with you today. Thank you very much. So I will talk to you about the transboundary waters in the portrait of groundwater in Mercosul. Here we have a map of the aquifers, the transboundary aquifers around the world, and the green points are the transboundary aquifers. So first, I will talk to you about some water facts, and I think it is very important to talk about the multiple uses of water as a whole. So water is fundamental for achieving sustainable development, economic development, health, maintaining healthy ecosystems. It is vital for human survival, health, as we saw with the pandemic, and also for adaptation to climate change. It is crucial to establish a link between the climate system, the human society, and the environment. And regarding the transboundary water facts, we have around the world 263 transboundary river basins and 468 transboundary aquifers. It is 64% of the countries share a transboundary aquifer with their neighbors. So it is more than half of the countries of the world. And we already know that the treatment regarding transboundary water in most cases is cooperation, but in the cases of agreements or formal arrangements for superficial water is higher than in the case of groundwater. So we have here a discrepancy. And in South America, we have 29 transboundary aquifers, but the case of Grainy Aquifer is the most advanced in terms of research and cooperation. I will talk a little bit about this case, and I think that Pilar is going to talk about this case either, so then we will talk a little bit more about it. And again, 29 transboundary aquifers in South America, but only a few aquifers have a formal project in progress, and many still require basic informations. So here, we have a complicated situation in South America. Now, the main theme of my presentation, that it is the transboundary aquifers in the Mercosur. The Mercosur is an important bloc here in South America. It was created in 1991 by Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and the bloc has several observer members. Also, the fundamental reason for its creation was the economic and commercial strengthening in the southern cone. It is important to say that we are talking about the context of globalization when we are talking about the creation of Mercosur. Regarding the environmental issues here in Mercosur, Mercosur doesn't have an instance for water management. This is very important. Water as a whole is not a main thing in Mercosur. Also, I think that 4 years after the creation of Mercosur, was created the first instance for environmental issues inside Mercosur. When we analyze the debates, the discussions in this instance, we see that environment is permeated by economic issues, and that this instance have a fixed agenda related to the block trait, like the environmental certification, for example. Here, I brought this chart of this environment, the environment instance. The first instance that was created, it is the working subgroup 6 formed by experts, and that it is subordinated to common market group formed by ministers of economy of the countries of Mercosur. We also have the group of environment ministers and the parliament with a commission formed by the parliamentarians that addresses the environmental issues. And they are both subordinated to the Common Market Council that is formed by the executive power of the countries of Mercosur. And Regarding the Guarany Aquifer case, it is important to talk about this case when we are talking about groundwater in Mercosur, because this case is the main reason of groundwater took place in Mercosur instance. So I brought this timeline here with the important dates to bring this case. So first in 2003, the Guarany Aquifer project took place between the countries that share these waters, and they are all also members of Mercosur. And because of that, the aquifer even became known as the Mercosur Aquifer. Between 2004 and 2005, during the project, there was an initiative to create an agreement that would regulate the protection and sustainability of the Guarany Aquifer. The negotiations took place at the environmental instance of Mercosur, and an ad hoc group was created. The Mercosur was chosen as an instance because the countries of Mercosur also already had this instance to talk about issues and things that was common between them, and one of them it was the Guarany Aquifer case. Then in 2006 and 2010, the ad hoc group was finalized because of the countries had disagreements regarding the text of the agreement. During this time, the groundwater issues took place at the Parliament, and the parliamentarians even considered the creation of an institute for groundwater, but not despite of the debates and discussions, we didn't see a concrete action regarding the groundwaters. Then in 2010, the countries signed the Guarany Aquifer agreement during a meeting of the presidents of Mercosur, and then between 2010 and 2021, the agreement goes through a lengthy ratification process. I think that Pilar is going to talk a little bit about this process too. And not only because of this process, but also because of this process, a new and smaller project begins for the management of Guarany Aquifer. So the conclusion that we can that we could talk about a little bit after this presentation is that although the environmental instance of Mercosur has been chosen for the debate on the Guarany Aquifer Agreement, groundwater has not gained space in the environmental topics discussed. As I said before, the groundwaters and water as a whole, they are not a main theme in Mercosur. And also Mercosur did not use this experience with the Guarany to allow the creation of governance system for transboundary groundwater within the bloc. Also, the agreement established a commission, but not in Mercosur, but in the committee of the La Plata Basin Treaty. So, Mercosur wasn't an option for them to establish this commission, this future commission that maybe is going to be formed after the process of ratification of the agreement. And 2 points may be responsible for the scenario. The first one is the subordination of environmental issues to trade issues inside Mercosur. And the second one is the intergovernmental decision-making structure of the bloc, and this structure keeps the decision-making power still insulated inside the national states and interests. The moment after the agreement, as we saw was more paralyzed, and the countries did not maintain the exchange of information and active cooperation. So now this new project for Guarany Aquifer seems to be a new opportunity to put on the agenda the management of Guarany Aquifer. But in my opinion, I don't think that Mercosur will have a role to play in this new project, because Mercosur don't seem to be engaged to this new project, or even to groundwater themes as a whole. So this was my presentation. Thank you very much again, and it will be a pleasure to talk to you and answer questions or doubts after the next presentation of the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Luisa, for your nice presentation. And now would like to bring you our next presenter. Please, Pilar, your turn.
I would like to thank you, the organization of the second event of the Groundwater Project, Making Groundwater Visible, for this opportunity. I will talk about the cooperation process over the Grainy, and how the coalition of international organization states and international law help to structure a governance process in this aquifer. First, I would like to introduce the Grainy aquifer system. I know that everybody knows this aquifer. It's a sedimentary aquifer. It stands across Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, covering an area about 1 million kilometers. But what I really would like to call the attention is to this image. You cannot see aquifers. So this spatial delimitation that I show in this image was only possible thanks to a process of cooperation that took place between different scales and actors. This cooperation process brings knowledge. For example, the geological formation extends over the 4 countries, but the transboundary groundwater flow is limited to the border areas. There are no conflicts in these areas. There isn't a transboundary critical situation concerning quantity or quality. Also, these cooperations introduce groundwater to society, and that is the main point of this cooperation international process. This knowledge about groundwater that was promoted between societies. When we analyze this cooperation process, it is possible to identify 4 phases. So the first one began in the last century, and this cooperation happened between universities during the 90s. And it was fundamental for the discovery of these aquifers and this transboundary nature of the aquifer. So the discovery of the aquifer only happened due to the exchange of information between different professors from regional universities that came with the hypothesis that local or national aquifers indeed constitute a single aquifer system. So the beginning of international cooperation dates back to the articulation of the epistemic community of the 4 countries. In fact, this is a characteristic of transboundary aquifers. Without technical cooperation, it is not even possible to determine the limits of an aquifer and therefore determine whether it is a transboundary or not. So the image that I show you in the other slide is so important because it puts the Grainy aquifer system as a transboundary aquifer. Before that, you have Botucatu Formation, Piramboia Formation, Misiones formations that are formations that are understand as local or national. So besides this, you cannot manage what you don't know. So epistemic community plays a key role in the case of Grainy because he starts this process of knowledge, of understanding this common base And in other aquifers, not only in Latin America, but in the world, epistemic community is like the main actor promoting knowledge. Through this information and knowledge gathered by this epistemic community, from 2000 onwards, it was possible to organize an international project proposal according to the Global Environmental Facility funding lines. Thus, in 2003, it was launched the big project, the Project Environmental Protection and Development of the Guarani Aquifer System, or simply the Guarani Aquifer System Project, which lasted until 2009. This project was a moment of building a common knowledge base. For this, there was an alliance between states, universities, and several international organizations such the Global Environmental Facility, the American States Organizations, the World Bank, International Atomic Energy Agency, among others. This process allowed groundwater to gain social prominence for the first time in the region. Only geologists talk about groundwater. This effervescence created a series of discussions on national and international level. So countries start to introduce groundwater in their inside agenda and their foreign affairs agenda. So on national level, policies have to include groundwater, and in fact, states produce legislation over this topic. And in some cases, they also create institutions to groundwater. Different university backgrounds start to explore other dimensions of groundwater, particularly that was my situation. That project motivated that a lawyer started to talk about aquifers. On the country's foreign affairs agenda, the aquifer was discussed in the Mercosur, as Maria Luísa exposed, and in the Mercosur Parliament, Maria Luísa also exposed about that. And in the end, an agreement was celebrated, which is the greatest point of cooperation in any transboundary water resource. However, the realization of this project was only possible because we have a favorable international environment that have dedicated funds to groundwater. In the 2000, groundwater entered in this international global agenda. The United Nations Commission on International Law began to discuss the regulation of aquifers. So we have the draft articles of the law of transboundary aquifers. In addition, several international programs and centers dedicated to groundwater were created. For example, the ISARM program, and Guarani Aquifer was included as a study case in the ISARM program in 2003. The Groundwater Management Advisory Team from World Bank, the UNESCO IGRAC Center, the Graphic Program, among many other initiatives that highlight groundwater, and how we culminated that the World Water Day is about groundwater. Considering the favorable international global environment to groundwater and the enthusiasm and need to fill the vacuum left by the Grainy project, on August 2, 2010, the country signed the Guarani Aquifer Agreement, which is, with this, a new cooperation phase starts, which focuses on states that have to ratify the agreement and implement it. However, as Maria Luísa told, the agreement took more than a decade to enter into force, and we still have some formal issues to overcome. So in our present decade, the challenge is finishing this process of entering into force and implementing the agreement. So let's talk about the agreement. The agreement was very celebrated for the international community because it was the first and only specific agreement for an aquifer in the Latin America. It was an example of preventive diplomacy. We don't have conflicts over Guarani. Nowadays, we have just 7 agreements for groundwater, and the other 6, we're talking about aquifers that have conflicts, that have a situation of scarcity. It was not the case of the Guarani. It mentioned the draft articles. It includes the main principles of international law, and it represents the continuity of the cooperational process established by the Grainy Aquifer project. Personally, I was very optimistic over it. I thought that would help to stimulate other countries in Latin America or even the States parts to sign other agreements to transboundary aquifers in the region, like Bauru Cauá or Amazons or Zarumilha, and so on. Unfortunately, the enthusiasm faded away due to the long process of ratification and entrance into force. Sorry. So what happened in this situation? Argentina and Uruguay ratified and make the deposit of the agreement in 2012. Unfortunately, in the same year, Paraguay refuted it, based that the agreement would compromise the country's sovereignty. This measure was much more related to the very sensible political moment involved in the impeachment of President Fernando Lugo, and even the position of Mercosur in the situation. Brazil, which was the depositary and the main user and the main owner of the aquifer, just ratified it in 2017. And in 2018, Paraguay finally ratified the agreement, but it didn't make the deposit, which is a condition to enter into force, as stated on Article 21(1) from the agreement. Without the deposit, we cannot complete the process. This deposit of the instrument of ratification from Paraguay came only in October 2020. So the agreement entered into force in November 26, 2020. However, we cannot celebrate yet because Brazil, as the depositary, has to promulgate a presidential decree saying that all countries have made a deposit and the agreement into force. However, more than a year has passed and we're still waiting the decree. So from international perspective, if you have a conflict, it's just a formality. The agreement entered into force. But without this formality, hardly will have the condition to countries sit down and make a plan to implement the agreement and define what are the priorities to be implemented. So let's take a look on our agreement. First, this agreement focuses on transboundary waters, which thanks to the Grainy project, we already know that do not correspond to our aquifer. So one of the priorities is to define what are the limits of those transboundary waters that are concentrated in the border areas. The main international water law principles, if we look here in the substantive rules, were in the agreement. So we have sovereignty, we have equitable and reasonable utilization, we have obligation not to cause harm, we have cooperation, or even a general statement recalling principles and norms of international law. So people that says, oh, the agreement is not good because puts lots of emphasis on sovereignty. Well, states have to have sovereignty to cooperate. That is not the problem because this sovereignty is restricted by the other international principles. So like equitable utilization, obligation not to cause harm. So this sovereignty is restricted, and we have to remember that not all aquifer is a shared resource. This transboundary flows is only in the border areas. We also have the main procedural rules that are in the international custom of international water law customs, such as the exchange of information, obligation to report and exchange data on planned measures, provided appropriated data, and also very specific cooperation actions linked to promote knowledge over Grainy aquifer system and in the identification of critical areas, especially on boundary areas. We also have the provision of a commission, however, it was not implemented and its powers and responsibilities are uncertain. Finally, there is a dispute settlement organized by direct negotiation and an arbitration procedure which is not established either. So we have core points here, institutional mechanisms that are not established. We have a dispute settlement that we also had to work on, and we have a scope that needs to be clarified. So what we can expect here? So how we link the international cooperation and the Grainy governance and manage? The main concrete results is knowledge and awareness. So this international cooperation was a huge step on these 2 points, knowledge and awareness. Thanks to the project, everybody knows Grainy. There are other 29 transboundary aquifers in South America, and they are not so recognized or on the national or international level. Also, the Grainy Aquifer project opened the path to create a UNESCO Category 2 center specific to groundwater called Seregas. We also have the approval of the new GEF project in the area that will bring more knowledge. Unfortunately, the highest point of international cooperation, which is the agreement, we are still waiting for the presidential decree for more than a year. Although it's a formality, it gives an indication that the cooperation under the framework of the agreement is stagnant. And without the establishment of the Agreements Commission, sorry to say, but in my opinion, it's just a piece of paper with a very limited role in the regional groundwater governance. It will just help to promote the curiosity of scholars to study groundwater, but will not have practical effects on cooperation. Without the side commission regulated, it's impossible to say if it is this international framework created by a whole international cooperation process that we saw the 4 phases of this cooperation process will or will not play a central role on transboundary groundwater governance. It can represent a positive actor to cooperation or just another commission that struggles to survive and nobody knows exactly what it's doing to promote cooperation. I saw in the other slide, this cooperation is not clear in the agreement where it will be hosted. It can be hosted by SIC, it can be hosted, it can be create another commission without any vinculation to SIC, or in my opinion, it would be desirable that countries establish a headquarters agreement to host the SAC commission with Seregas. So the commission could benefit of the infrastructure and experience of Seregas, which is already a player in promoting cooperation. The start of this GEF-SAG project is a consequence of this process of cooperation. It's a continuity of the Grainy Aquifer System projects, and maybe with the involvement of international organizations and the provision of funds, might create a more favorable environment to implement the agreement. Also, this project would maybe help to create again a public mobilization and restart the sense of urgency and priority on public authorities. And for the end, the cooperation on Grainy has to overcome a regional fragility of transboundary water cooperation in general, which is the dependence of funds from external projects. We have many commissions in the area, but most of it, we don't know what they are doing, and they struggle to survive, and they only have an active role if they get funds to implement a project. So that's what I have to expose today to you. I hope you like it. Thanks for your attention. This is the recharge area of the Grainy. Just to remember that we can be, all of us are above an aquifer, even if we don't know that, but we live above aquifers. So that's it. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Pilar. That was a very nice presentation indeed. I like it. And I would like to go to, very interesting. I have some, some lines to discuss with you here, but I'd like to pose a question before anything. We're talking, well, 2 questions then, not only one. Yes. First thing is, Pilar mentioned briefly, but how difficult it is for someone who's not a hydrogeologist to become, an expert or understanding groundwater or working in groundwater, and maybe talking to geologists. How can you, mention your experience and bring some more people to the team?
Well, let's say that is hard level. Geologists, like lawyers, I have to be truth. We have a very particularly discourse and a way to put things that is not easy and is not simple to communicate. I remember when I started talking, I started be interest about groundwater. People came with terms like recharge area, sedimentary aquifers. Which one that was nice to confined aquifers. The difference between, there is another one technical ones, but in English I get kind of I mix everything. Aquicludes, and all of these terms, and I just say, oh my God. And I remember that the first person that helped me was a geologist. On that time, he was not a professor, he was a researcher at UNESCO at UNESCO. And I came, what is a diabásio? I don't know how to translate that to English, and a basalto, which are types of rocks. What's the difference? I can understand that. And he was explaining how was recharge flow. And I entered to a class. I started to do the discipline of Ricardo Irata from hydrogeology. The first class was okay, and then came the second with lots of equations of hydrology flow, and people talking about hydrology flows, and they just say, okay, I just cancel the discipline because I say I cannot do that. And I think that is the problem. In the moment that we focus on this part of the technical, very, very, very precise technical aspects, don't even geologists enter into an agreement, because they fight between each others about that, about if the direction of the flow goes down or not goes down, or where is the direction of this flow is going on, or if it's an interference of wells, or if it's a really depletion of the aquifer. We're losing people. People will not understand us. We have to translate that in terms of people can understand. So it's water. You are using water to do what? To produce, to supply people, to produce, soil beans. What are you using? If you lost this aquifer, how much you will lose? Maybe the economics here will be much more understandable than the geology. Or maybe if you start to explain people the importance of these waters in the hydrological cycle, or even to explain to people that if he lost his well, it's a signal that something is not going on with the aquifer. It is not something divine. It's not a divine thing. It's because you have a depletion of the aquifer. If this depletion is caused by the interference of the wells you have too much wells that are not respecting the perimeters, or if it's a depletion, a case of overexploitation, you have a problem. So it's a change of language, and not a matter of egos trying to be very erudite about the geology points. I think that is something important. Also, we have to understand that groundwater is not a technical issue. Groundwater is a political issue. When we need technicals to say, to answer questions like, how much water do I have? That is a question that geologists have to tell us. What are the limits of the aquifer? That is a question that geologists have to say. But how this water will be used, and what measures will be done, or even how I will tolerate or not tolerate an overexploitation, or how I compensate this overexploitation. These are the focus of the debate. It's a political. Or even why groundwater users, they prefer to be clandestine. Most of our groundwater users are clandestine, are illegal or irregular, and they make the difference. Irregular, they can be regular users. They just have to go to the state's water resource organ and do the paperwork. The illegal, which are cases very specific, you cannot extract because there is a restriction zone, or because you have water service from water, like how can I say, public water service. In this case, they are illegal. They will not be able to get the water permits. But that is not the most of it.
I understand, and I'm totally with you, Maria Luisa. What about your experience? You share the same experience somehow?
Yes, for sure. I'm graduated in international relations, and I had that shock that Pilar had with the language. And I think that this is a very important issue to our debate. It is the language, because we need to talk and create instance to dialogue with population as a whole, to bring knowledge and establish a conversation. And the language is a big challenge for us at the university, and thinking about other circles that we need to achieve somehow.
That's true. I understand that very deeply, and I sympathize with you, because I used to be maybe I still am, right? Someone who was talking in jargon and nobody would understand what the hell I was talking about when I was talking groundwater. So try to you know, not to use groundwater jargon, which is not easy for someone who was raised under that. So when you learn a concept, and the first thing you know is the name of the concept, that's it. So it's hard to get around that. And in my experience, I also see that when I try to write a text for a wider audience, and I get rid of all the jargon, you know, geologists write to me that I'm not using the proper terminology for the text. And for example, I have a very good example. I don't write aquifers, because many people don't have a clear idea of what an aquifer is. I tend to write subterranean water reservoirs, right? Like a natural subterranean water reservoirs, and explain a little bit, and then go and may use aquifer after I present it. And people say, well, why are you writing all these words unnecessarily, right? Well, but you know, for a wider audience, we need that. But again, let's come back to our topic. We were talking about transboundary aquifers. And I have to ask you a question, because you both mentioned about the Grainy aquifer, and you were clear to say that there were no disputes on that. So it was basically supposed to be an easy subject. The question is, if there's no dispute, why bother? That's isn't it the reason that no money is poured into the projects? I understand they're very important. I just want to know if there's no dispute, why bother doing and working on that? Isn't it the reason that politicians are not really keen on doing that? What do you think? Isn't it, or on the other hand, isn't it our duty to work the subject to make it attractive and showing the real importance that lays with this subject for the politicians? I don't know.
Okay, that is a dilemma on international affairs. If you don't have disputes, it's much more harder to get the resources and to motivate the cooperation, because you do not have the sense of urgency or priority. But on the other hand, you have already started a cooperation process. This cooperation process is going on. So why to stop it? All the countries have understand the importance of the Grainy. They like to highlight the importance of the Grainy, that they are taking care of Grainy, but they just stop it. What I think is, in this actual moment, we have other issues. We just have, we're still in a pandemic situation.
Yes.
We have now that the Brazil has the, how can I say, is the one that's in debt with the other countries, is a depository country. Our government is not very sensible to environmental issues. I'm not saying about groundwater, I'm saying environmental in general. We have many, how can I say the word, setbacks in relation to environmental regulation, and also in relation to our international affair postures concerning environment. So I really don't see any aspect of environment able to grow and able to flourish in our political scenery. I think that maybe the new Grainy Aquifer project will bring this matter again, and then we have the publication, because it's something like with the international movement, when you have people from international organizations investing in the countries, they want to see results. So this Grainy Aquifer agreement, in some part, was like a pressure of all these international organizations say, okay, we have invested millions, and what's the result? Just knowledge? We want something more. And okay, this new project is a medium project. It's not like the first one, but it's an intermediate project. After this one, they will make another bigger like the first one. So this is something that can give some motivation. And we have to think that when we talk about groundwater, normally cooperation on groundwater is different from cooperation from surface water, because if you don't have data, you don't have groundwater conflicts, because you don't see it, you don't see contamination, you don't see overexploitation, you just see these problems if you have data. And I remember a geologist that told me, look, girl, if you don't want to have problems with groundwater, just don't do studies. Then you don't have any problem with groundwater. So that is a particularity of groundwater, is that cooperation, the base of cooperation is not conflict like surface water. The base of cooperation in groundwater is knowledge, is promoting knowledge.
I like that. It's like that. I never go to a doctor because they always say that I might be sick, right? If I don't go, I'm fine. That's the same reason, right? Don't study. You never know the problem. That's the idea, I guess. Maria Luisa, it's yours.
I agree with Pilar in the environment theme and the government here, especially here in Brazil. It is a big problem that we have, and challenge to cooperation in any issue that it is related to environment, and also the knowledge that it is fundamental for established cooperation and generate data. And this is a main challenge here in South America. As I said in my presentation, we have 29 transboundary aquifers, and only the case of Grainy is in a advanced terms in research and cooperation. And we have many aquifers that still doesn't have data and the minimal knowledge for it. So this thing, it is really really a challenge, and centers like Ceregas, they are an important step in doing this scenario.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I have to take the opportunity to mention your book, Pilar. Yeah, take the opportunity for people to see your book as the Transboundary Aquifers, Water, and Grainy Aquifer. Okay, so briefly, what was your expectation when you wrote it, and what is it now after it is published? Have you reached part of your expectation? Because I know publishing books is, you work a lot, and it's not always what we expect, right? But I hope yours was good.
Well, let's say that my expectation was to make an overview of how transboundary aquifers are governed. So in the international level, in the level of the 4 states that signed the Grainy Aquifer. I was very happy with the results. For my surprise, there are persons buying it. Okay, I will not be rich by my book, but some people contact me because read my book, and that is a very, very nice to answer this. But I have to say that I was a little bit frustrated about this transboundary governance of aquifers. And many times people ask me why I think that transboundary governance in the region is a little bit stagnated, and why we have this agreement that I was, as I told you in the beginning, I was very excited. I published the book, I published an article on Water International saying that was a new paradigm of cooperation. And in the end, okay, let's put our feet in the earth, because it's not like that. It was something revolutionary on paper, but the implementation make our dreams go to earth again, and we have to wake up. And I think that the main point of it, and that caused it included a kind of change of perspective in my career, is that we cannot have transboundary governance if we don't have national governance. No. And most of Latin American countries do not have clear laws about groundwater. They also don't have technical studies. There is a lack of professional with capacity to produce, interpret groundwater data. You know, you that talk about the jargon of geology. So let's do some posh studies, God studies, drastic studies with all these methodologies, with these fancy acronyms. Most of users are illegal. The groundwater organisms doesn't know how much users we have. We don't have, society don't have any clue about groundwater. So if you cannot manage groundwater under your sovereign space, how you establish deals with other countries? If you don't know the dimension of the aquifer in your own territory, the percent of the use, the water conditions, you can sit on the table and negotiation, promote transboundary. The only thing you can do is sit with the other country and do, well, let's do some studies together. That's what, that is limited by that. So I think this transboundary governance was very rich in the sense that makes states to look to groundwater, to look at how they are doing in their water management policy, how they included groundwater. So nowadays I am much more interested in this national view of the groundwater governments than international level. I think that in the international level, we are kind of stagnate, at least here in the case of the Grainy, and we're stagnate for more than 10 years. But on the national level, we have some, how can I say, positive steps going on. And personally, I'm conducting some studies analyzing how states are including groundwater, since you allow me to make some, how can I say, some media about my production. And I am doing these studies because I really are much more interested in the national perspective than the international. I didn't see that the transboundary.
We're not alone, I'd say, because most countries don't have. And not
Yeah,
only,
no, it's South America. Put South America.
But but not only South America, and even in developed countries, many are far behind. It's not an easy issue. That's why we created the groundwater project. Our idea is to bring it up, to make it a subject that people care. Not an easy task, but we're working hard for it. So Maria Luisa, you're doing well. You teach. You work with groundwater and you teach something related to groundwater. What's your experience? Do you think we can change the world and we can make the world a better place by knowing groundwater? I do.
Yes, it would be nice, especially bringing knowledge to people and students. I teach in the Department of International Relations, and I gave a discipline last year of environment and international relations. And in that discipline, I could talk with my students about the groundwaters, the Mercosur also, because it was the theme of my master's degree, and a little bit about water as a whole. I brought some specialists in water to talk with them and to establish a dialogue, and it was a very nice opportunity. And I think that they were motivated by the theme and the environment and international relations. I think it is a first step with them.
Well, that's very good. That's very welcome. I like to hear that. Well, ladies, our time is up here, but I'll put a final question. So if you could be brief before we make our closing remarks. You are two ladies working with groundwater. What is the role of women in water resources? Do you think they're doing a fine job? How many women we have in your experience? Is it a male subject or not? What's your experience, and what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that in the case of groundwater, I have very good women role models here in Brazil, or even abroad in the third countries. I think that is an area of geology that we have many women working, different from other areas like oil and gas or mining, like gold mining and things like that. But groundwater, you have lots of really, really good professionals. And even one of the how can I say, Ophelia, I'm trying to remember the last name, was one of the professions that was involved even in the discovery of the Grainy, because she works in the area of Argentina and realized that maybe there was a connection with the waters from Uruguay. So I think that groundwater and women are very related. I am one of the names in the part of law, and we have also Luciana from Unicamp that also works with groundwater law. So I think that women rocks on groundwater.
You, Maria Luisa.
I think that giving room for dialogue and creating space for a debate with women and showing their studies and promoting their studies in women who work professionally or are involved in other practice related to groundwater is a really nice and important step to us to bring equality to our discussion and to give space for this amazing women that are researching and doing their jobs in this team.
Thank you. Well, our time is up. Please, would you make a your final statement for our audience, please? You go first again, Pilar, and then last, Maria Luisa.
Well, let's say that groundwater is an issue that has to be dealt in different scales. You have transboundary, you have national, and you have local. But see, in the end, groundwater is a very local aspect. When you lose, people suffer the consequence of groundwater depletion in the local space. And many times when you have a problem with your well, you not think about the other nation, you think about your neighbor. Most of the time it's your neighbor that is causing these problems. But local is not capable to deal with the complexity of groundwater. It needs the help of the other levels, and the other levels can help local to promote water governance, and also the other levels has to incentivize this groundwater governance. So what I have to say is groundwater has to be dealt in different scales by different actors.
Thank you very much. Maria Luisa, please.
I agree with Pilar. Groundwater must be addressed in local level, and also I think that as a teacher, knowledge is the only way for us to. That's why I always say about dialogue, creating instance for debate, because I think that this is the only way for us to make people know about these waters and where they come from, their finitude, and also how these waters are related to their day by day. So knowledge, and bring people's knowledge and space, it is fundamental to start our conversation and make pressure for changes in this team.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for presenting, for your nice participation. We have here Pilar, Carolina Villar, and Maria Luisa, who are presenting their experience in groundwater. They both have an interesting view, and they agree that when you see groundwater in a larger, a larger view, like we are looking from the sky, and you see boundary, transboundary aquifers, we still need people that are related to the water in their own places. So it's something that has, a touch in people's lives. So we have to be careful, and we have to bring that to this wider audience so they know how their lives are being touched by groundwater. Thank you very much. Congratulations for a nice job that you're putting. Thank you very much. We would like to thank you all for participating. Again, please help us make groundwater visible by following us on social media and sharing with your friends. Please distribute our material, help translate our books and publications in your own language, and consider making a donation. We are a not-for-profit organization that depends on people like you. We'd like to thank you again to all our sponsors, and thank you very much for participating.